What is going on, football fans? Welcome back to another edition of Miners Live. I am your host, Chris Dunn, head coach, general manager of the Sacramento Miners. Hello again, football fans. We are back at it after last week, needing to take the week off. For those of you that were unaware, lots of travel for me last week. Just had some commitments. I wasn't going to be able to sit down at the usual time. So was able to put together the Final Four rankings for last week. Was just not able to get the show together and be here for you guys last week. So back at it this week for an episode of Miners Live. I do have, once again, the Final Four rankings. Final Four, the first four out. And then also I have two teams that are still in the hunt. So you will see my top 10, call it power rankings, call it whatever you want, presented by Campus Rewind, but it's the final four, the first four out. And then there's two teams that I have labeled as still in the hunt. Now we're going to go over those. We're going to go over those teams, kind of look at how they got here to this point, and also what the road ahead looks like for them. But one thing I will tell you right now, if you are not one of those 10 teams that you're going to see later on in the show, do yourself a favor and start playing for next season. It might sound harsh. You might not want to hear it, but do yourself a favor and be doing absolutely everything you can to get yourself in a better position for next season. Because there is very slim chances for any team outside the top 10 right now to get all the way up into the top four. You want to make a bowl game, fine. If we want to talk about bowl games, we can talk about bowl games. And a lot of those teams will make bowl games, and that is nice, and that's great. And you can get yourself a nice little hoodie that says Cotton Bowl Champions, and you can get yourself a nice little pin, and you can, get a trading card and sign it and send it to your mom and dad back in Arizona State, right? You can send a little blanket to your parents up in Washington. Right. Well, no, those teams aren't going to make a bowl game. So I guess that wouldn't even count. That wouldn't even hold any weight. The point is there are several teams that are going to make bowl games. To be bowl eligible, you have to be 500 or better. There's going to be several teams that do that. That doesn't mean that any of those teams have a chance at actually making the Final Four. And again, we'll go into that a little bit later on in the show. But first and foremost, right off the rip, please, guys, if you do not already subscribe to the YouTube channel, go on YouTube, hit the subscribe button on the channel. It's Sacramento Miners. My name's also right there, Chris Dunn. Please, I believe right now we are at 70 subscribers, or maybe we're at that lucky number right before 70. Many of you might know what that is. Really want to get to 100. Really looking to get to 100 subscribers. As we get closer to 100, maybe I'll throw out some contests to try to get over that hump. But again, as soon as we get to 100 subscribers, I'm going to give away a t-shirt. I'm hoping to get to 100 subscribers before the RFL season starts. So that's sort of my goal. And then if we get to that 100 subscriber mark, I will give out a t-shirt to one lucky subscriber, one lucky fan, follower, listener out there. So kind of nice, cool. Give yourself some RFL swag right before the season starts. So that's kind of something cool to look forward to. Also on Twitter at MinersRFL, on Instagram at MinersRFL. Okay. So we've got the top 10 power rankings coming up in the show a little bit later on. But before we get into any of that, one thing that I wanted to address is that I have some breaking news out of Sacramento Miners camp. The Sacramento Miners front office has been doing some work, putting some work in post-draft. Many of you know this show kicked off. This show started right after the draft was done. and we went a few weeks talking about draft classes, guys that fell in the draft, rookies that will have a big impact in their first season in the RFL. We went over a lot of that stuff in the earlier episodes of the show. And it's kind of been this down period a little bit for the RFL, obviously with the college series in full swing. At this point, we do have many of the teams have their rosters complete and put together, getting ready for the RFL season. A lot of us coaches have gone through some workouts. We've gotten some players in pads. We've got some players in uniforms. We've had a chance to take the field, see what some of these guys look like. A lot of the teams you saw have new uniforms. We did the London Bulldogs a couple weeks ago. You saw what those uniforms are going to look like. Also, there's a couple other teams. I think the London Black Knights also have a new look this year. We will not have new uniforms. I don't like the other two options for the Sacramento Miners. I've gone through and played out to see what they look like. And I just don't think that any of the other two options compare to what the current uniform design is. So for that reason, we're going to stick with the uniforms that we had last year. If you saw those uniforms, those are going to be the uniforms from last year. We will try to work in some additional jersey combinations, uniform combinations. But that might be kind of tricky given the home team versus the away team and which uniform we're going to be able to use based on if we're the road team, the home team's going to have first say, and we might not be able to switch if we are the visiting team. If we're logged in, if broadcast games are logged in as the home team, you can only make the switch to that home team unless somebody goes in prior and makes a switch. So we're going to try to do some uniform adjustments and make some combination changes as we can throughout the season. Those of you that saw a couple weeks ago, I put out that post with the color rush uniform with the all navy jerseys and the navy pants. I would definitely like to implement that into a couple games this year, maybe in a couple primetime games. I think that would be nice. See if there's another team that also has a color rush uniform option. That would be something that would look pretty cool if we had the navy blue pants on the navy blue uniform and we're going against a team that had something like a red on a red or even just like a white on a white, just to give it that color rush look. That would be something that I'd be trying to get coordinated at some point throughout the season. So that's all stuff that we've gone over in the past. Those are all things that we've talked about. I am really excited for not just what the rookie class looks like, but also some of the guys that were on the team last year that didn't really get a lot of chance to play. So there's a couple of guys, and throughout the course of the next couple of weeks, as we get closer to the end of the college series, some of those down weeks after the college series or in between bowls, I'm going to have a chance to go over some of the players on the team that were on the team last year, but maybe didn't get a lot of shine, didn't get a lot of play, who are going to be looked at as key contributors this year. I can think of about 2 or 3 guys off the top of my head that I think you didn't see much of at all last year. If they took the field at all, they didn't have big contributions. You probably didn't see their name in the paper. You probably didn't see much of anything on the stat sheet. But this year, I think they're going to have a big impact. Some of those guys are rookies, but a lot of those guys are just guys that are coming into their second year. Maybe they were a rookie last year, or it's their third year in the league. It's a recent acquisition that I obtained through free agency. Whatever the case might be, these are some guys that you're going to want to get to know if you're a fan of the Sacramento Miners and you're going to be watching a lot of the Gold Rush this year. Some key names and contributors. But enough stalling, right? I really do have some big, important news. Many of you know that all of us user coaches, general managers who oversee day-to-day operations of a team, we have the ability to build up our coaching staff, right? We have the ability to build up a coaching staff of guys that we want to come in and help. Whoever those guys might be, in whatever role they might fit, whether it's a guy that you want to have come in as a bench coach or an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator. A lot of times, guys might be a good fit. So one of the things that I have spent some time doing over the last, I'd say probably 2 or 3 weeks. I thought about it probably about a month or so ago, and over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks, conversations have kind of picked up a little bit. Some things have been talked about, what responsibilities might be, what the roles might be around a particular position that I was looking to hire for within the Miners front office. And so I've come to the decision. I've created a role within the Sacramento Miners front office for a particular position that is important to me, that I think will help the team. It will help eliminate and alleviate some of the day-to-day things that sometimes become difficult for me to do because there's so many other things going on. And so I've created this position, and I have recently decided on hiring someone for the role of director of scouting and player personnel. So the Sacramento Miners heading into season 7 will have a director of scouting and player personnel. And I'm super thrilled and super excited to announce the director of scouting and player personnel for the Sacramento Miners is your boy, Anthony Frye. Anthony Frye will take over. Obviously, he is a rookie on the team, was just recently drafted as a tight end out of Texas A&M, but I'm super excited. We've had conversations throughout like I said, the last month, going over what it is that I would be looking for in someone to fulfill this role, that scouting role, to be able to look at not just the offensive side of the ball, but the defensive side of the ball, and kind of had a chance to talk to him a little bit about what his strengths are and what he thinks he's going to be able to bring to the team. So I'm super excited to have Anthony Frye as a member of the Sacramento Miners front office, and even more excited to have Anthony Frye on the show right now. Let's go out to the phones. Coach Frye, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, guys? Really happy to be here. Really happy to be a part of this. Excited for this opportunity moving forward.
All right, so I got to ask you, what is of course you're excited, right? What is the thing that you are most excited about?
I really like taking a chance to get to know all of these guys we got in season 3, and getting to really figure out who's going to bring what to the team, apart from just the normal abilities on the football field, what they're bringing to us. And I'm looking forward to getting to know these guys and talk to them, and extend this Miner family even further with more league first mentality guys, that we have.
Sure. Well, apparently this didn't come to as much of a surprise to several people out there, as we can see already. Mitch out in the chat, I would have never guessed.
That was too much excitement for Mitch's voice. He wouldn't have said it that excited.
No, and that's certainly sarcasm. It's also difficult to convey sarcasm in Mitch's voice, but that, my friends and listeners, is definitely Mitch being sarcastic. But let's go out to the chat room here and bring in some of these guys. We got Leo Moon. Congrats, Coach Frye.
Thank you, Leo.
We got
looking forward to watching that.
Lito Loso. I mean, look, Leo Moon and Lito Loso, fellow draft picks like yourself in this past draft. Lito Loso, first round pick. Leo Moon, first pick in the second round. Actually, just a couple of picks before you in the second round. These are guys that we're going to have to. Actually, we're not going to have to, because Lito Loso we will not play against as a member of the Wizards. And Leo Moon, remind me, refresh my memory. Where'd you get drafted?
Wizard. I believe he went to the Wizards.
No, did they both go to the Wizards?
I believe they both went to the Wizards.
They did. Okay, that's why I was like, wait, I thought they. Okay, yeah. So we're not going to have to worry about Leo Moon or Leo Loso, because they're both going to be playing for the Wizards next year. For those of you that don't know, the way that the RFL is set up is that the ARC only plays games against the ARC. So unfortunately, with Madden set up the way that it is right now, we're not able to have all 32 teams in one file. So we have to have 16 teams on one file, 16 teams on another file. And so for that reason, the ARC will only play games against each other, because if you know anything about the actual NFL schedule, the way that the NFL does their scheduling, the AFC and the NFC only have 4 games a year with teams outside of their conference in the opposite conference. So the way the RFL is set up is that those 4 games on the RFL schedule are automatic wins for that team. So you might notice that if you look at the standings and you look at the records from teams last year, you have a hard time wrapping your head around the fact that a team could go 10-6 but not make the playoffs. Well, you have to realize 4 of those games were automatic wins. So in the RFL season against RFL teams, a 10-6 team was 500. They simply kissed their sister. They went 6-6. They didn't make the playoffs. They finished in last place, right? So many of you already know that's how it's set up. But for those of you that don't, that's why you see teams with very good records not make the playoffs. We are hoping that next year with the new Madden, maybe that will change and we will be able to put all 32 teams in one file and we won't have that issue. But we'll have to wait and see until that time comes. We got to wait until next August, I guess. So, Coach, let me ask you, offense or defense?
Defense. That's for me. That was me coming through football all through the years, playing safety and corner. So defense is what I love and what I love to build around. But offense obviously has its place. But when it comes down push down to shove, defense is where I feel like I want to always build out from.
Okay. This is a good point. Mira Williams brought up in the chat. I completely forgot. They switched the schedule, obviously, now to no longer 17 weeks and a 16-game schedule, but 18 weeks and a 17-game schedule. So there's actually going to be 5 games this year where there's the potential for cross-conference. So there will be 5 automatic wins this year. So it'll be really interesting to see what the divisions are going to look like. I think that with that extra game, with that 17-game schedule, with teams not being able to go 500 anymore, I think it's going to be very interesting to see, where the divide is, like where that dividing line is in teams that make the playoffs versus don't make the playoffs. Because again, there's still 7 teams that make the playoffs, but now I think there's going to be less conversation and less, I don't want to say controversy, because at the end of the day, the tiebreakers are set up the way that they are set up. So there's not really controversy behind it. It just is what it is.
Division still going to matter a lot.
Yeah. Either you get in with the tiebreaker, you don't, there's not much controversy to it. I just think that no more 8-8 seasons are a good thing. Apparently I'm not alone here. Alvin Mack right there. No more 8-8 seasons. 100% agree. I don't think anybody likes the 8-8 season. I know as a fan of football in general, I could not stand when a team would make the playoffs at 8-8, or even worse, when a team would win their division because they went 7-9. We've seen it. I think it was, I want to say like 2011, maybe 2010 or 12. The Seattle Seahawks got in one year, and I want to say they were 7-9, but won the division. Maybe they were 8-8. And it just, I don't think it's good for the game when an 8-8 team gets in, but a 9-7 team or even a 10-6 team doesn't get in. I think that's kind of, I think it's just ridiculous, right? Would you agree, Coach?
Yes and no.
Don't tell me that you like it. You like
strength of schedule comes into play. Division rivalries come into play, and I'm a Cowboy fan, so 8-8 is
you're
acceptable.
An NFC East fan. That's why you like the 8-8.
I think it's completely fine to go 7-9, win your division, and move into the playoffs. But it is a sore
what the
spot.
Cowboys do every year.
Yeah, hopefully every year. I'll take it. It's a sore spot for the team who does go 10-6 and lands last place in the division. It's it's rough. And it's just how the cookie has crumbled for them into what division they're in. But I think no matter where you are, what division you're in, you just got to win the most games you can and get into the playoffs, and then reset and get that playoff energy and push forward.
All right, so let's get back to the Miners here and what this move means, what the hire bringing you in. I know I'm super excited. One of the things that I've I think I mentioned this to you a while back when we finished the draft and got to chatting a little bit. I remember I brought you on. I think it was actually the pilot episode of the show, the first episode of the show when you came
Just after
on.
the draft.
Yeah, right after the draft. And was just really excited. I think the thing that I appreciate the most about you is your openness and your ability to not just provide insight and feedback, but also take suggestions and guidance. And I think that's important in a position like this. I know that I have certain areas on the team that I would like to focus on. And certainly you and I have talked about that. I'm not going to divulge too much of, our scouting board and what that might look like, but certainly there are positions that I look for in this upcoming draft based on what the team looks like now versus what I want the team to look like moving forward. Have you had a chance to look at this upcoming draft class and get any sort of a sense of which position you feel is the biggest strength in this draft class? Like, is there one position that stands out more than others that you think you're going to be able to get a really impactful player, maybe in the third or fourth round? And then after that, also go into maybe a position that's a little weak where you're going to have to get that guy in the first round. Otherwise, you may not get that position at all because there just isn't a lot of talent available.
Yeah. I think the position with the most depth from what I've seen is at wide receiver. I feel like so many teams have not just two, but three receivers, and even some cases there's just a lot of talent, and there's incredibly capable guys who just aren't getting the ball because the first and second read is open, so the third read doesn't get seen, or the tight end is picking up, or the running back, the plays are designed for the running back. So I feel like there's so many talented receivers that can blow up one game and then disappear the next, and it's not a knock on them. It's just a matter of the quarterback taking advantage of what's available to them. So I think that you can sit on receivers in this draft and still get immense talent later on to them in the middle rounds. And I feel the same way with cornerbacks as well, with defensive backs. There's an insane amount of people who wanted to be in that position and made insane builds, completely capable. And there are guys who are showing out with a lot of interceptions, and then there are guys who are showing out with not allowing yards, and they're not getting tested. So I think in those two spots, I think you're gonna be able to find some depth. When it comes to a lack of depth, I feel the defensive interior, the defensive tackles, and even defensive ends to some point, there's not a whole lot that's been made. Some, I know West Virginia, North Carolina, Miami, Baylor. Baylor is still fresh in my mind, of course. Those guys have solid defensive lines and defensive tackles, but there's just not a big depth there. They're going to go quickly. And then we have a handful of defensive ends who are making big splashes with Keegan and Keno and the guy at North Carolina, Bishop or something with a B. But there's a lot of talented guys out there who are going to go quick. And I don't think you can really sit on that in this upcoming draft.
Yeah, I don't think it should come as any surprise to any of you out there that the wide receiver position is going to be pretty deep. The cornerbacks are going to be pretty deep. You could make an argument that skill positions in general, the wide receiver, the running back, the quarterback, the cornerback, those positions are typically pretty deep. Why? I mean, it's not rocket science. A lot of guys that create user submitted players want to play those skill positions. And so because of that, like you said, we're going to see guys. Okay. Perfect example, right? End of the second round, we were able to get Pavel Frederick. I've talked about this several times at how amazed I was that Pavel Frederick was still available at the end of the second round.
Complete surprise that he was still available. He's such a talent.
Yeah. There's there was some really good offensive linemen in the draft last year. And, offensive linemen's not a very sexy position, but there was a couple guys that were taken in the second round that are going to be very impactful this year.
I feel like there's going to be a lot more O-line options. There's got to be 15 in this upcoming year draft, maybe 12 to 15 submitted O-linemen. And then on top of that, there's some absolute tanks, generics out there. I think Alabama's entire generic O-line is in the high 80s, low 90s. I think they're phenomenal. I think there's going to be a little bit more availability with linemen in the upcoming draft.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I haven't had a chance to look at the total number of actually, I think I might have it right here. The total number of offensive linemen. I mean, if we look at, no, it's not letting me. It's
I mean, there's
out.
probably 3 teams with a full 5-man front. So
yeah, so I mean,
West Virginia, Miami.
I'm looking at.
I think Georgia's got 2 or 3. Baylor, North Carolina.
Looks like 14 user submitted offensive tackles, 1 user submitted center, and 5 user submitted guards. So basically 20 user submitted offensive linemen.
Then generics.
Plus, not to mention the generics, like you mentioned. Alabama's the full roster at Alabama, I believe, is draft eligible. That's one of the few teams that actually all the generics were created for. So,
and I noticed something else weird with this particular season. There are a handful of generic running backs that are in second string right now that when they come in to give the starter a break, they make great cuts, they make great moves, they have good ball vision. There's a lot of generic running backs that could very easily separate themselves. But I think that's where the submitted guys are going to really have to step in and make themselves different, because those players, if left alone, are going to promote or progress at the same speed in the RFL. It's the guys who are a part of the league and involved and want to bring reloads to the table to grow their players. Like, those are the guys that are going to be hot commodity. That's more important than being the number 1 receiver in yards. If you're the number 10 guy, you're solid talent, and you're going to be there to support your guy and grow him. Like, you're going to have so much more value down the road.
Yeah, I think one thing that I notice, and it'll be interesting to see if this actually happens during the draft, and maybe things will change with next year's college series, because again, this crop of talent is going to have to play 2 seasons at college. So basically they're playing their sophomore year and junior year before coming out a year early, or junior year and senior year before, becoming draft eligible. So one thing that I've noticed, and again, it might change, but when I look at the running back class from this past draft, right, the College Series 2 group of running backs, I think there were a lot more guys in that class that were standout, no doubt. These guys are going in the first or second round, and that's it. Normally we don't often see running backs taken in the first round, right? They have a short shelf life. The lifespan of a running back in professional football isn't that long. That's not changing in the RFL. So we don't often see guys reach. You certainly don't see running backs go in the top 10. It's not often you see them go in the top 15. Maybe the back end of the first round, you get that extra year of control by taking a player in the first round. So there's interest there from a general manager's perspective. But a lot of times you see running backs go in the second round. When I look at this group of running backs in the college series right now, College Series 3, I don't think there's a single running back that I would take with a first round draft pick. And maybe even
I can see that, depending on team need and what's available. But with this next coming season, I know that fatigue is supposed to be such a bigger factor, and I think depth at running back is going to be very important. And I do wholeheartedly agree that Perkins and Amir last year stood out far and away as just 2 amazing studs who could have gone top 15 to the right teams. And I don't see those 2 equals in this upcoming class, but I do see a lot, not as big of a drop off between the running backs after that. I see a lot of talented guys who are making splashes and making waves.
Yeah. So Alvin Mack brings up a good point here. Running back depth is deep in College Series 3. Okay. I 100% agree. I don't disagree with that statement. Like, on the surface, that statement is 100% accurate. However, when I look at the depth, right? The depth of the draft class. Let's actually run through this. And let's talk about guys like Darnell Hodge at Miami, Grayson Mitchell at West Virginia, Kazim Cash at Alabama, True Bronze at Baylor, Javon Berryhill at TCU, Elijah Swan, North Carolina, Jacarius Best, Georgia, Justin Creel, Oregon. Out of all those names that I just gave you, can you, without hesitation, tell me who the number one guy is?
Grayson Mitchell out of West Virginia. I feel like
I feel like you're trying really hard to make him the number one, though.
I feel like he's got incredible potential, but you are correct. There's no clear. Like I get the gut feeling he's gonna be the best. His build is outrageous. He won the lottery. Didn't even touch speed and acceleration and got above 96 on both. I think he's got the potential for the best build, and he's got a fully submitted O-line. So I think he's got an opportunity to be the best, but you can't discredit what Hodge does or what Cash does. You can't discredit Bess or any of these other guys. True Bronze, who went off last night. Well, there's part of my worry with the running backs could be they're so equally talented that none of them will stand out, which means they're all going to come out in the draft similarly rated. One of the things we know Smitty does kind of see these guys, and if you stand out, that's represented with your rankings and your ratings. And so if we just have a big pool of good running backs, then they might all just be interchangeable when the time comes.
Right. And I guess that's probably where I was leaning with that statement I made earlier about I firmly believe that none of these running backs will get taken in the first round. And it's not, I guess, let me clarify. It's not because I don't think that they're talented enough. It's twofold. One, running backs don't typically go in the first round, just in general. I think last year we saw two, and they were Amir Williams and Cam Perkins. And I'll be honest, no one in this draft class is Amir Williams or Cam Perkins. They're just not. None of these guys. I mean, you could take Grayson Mitchell and True Bronze and put them together, and I would still want Amir Williams or Cam Perkins before either one of those guys. So, those are the only two guys that went in the first round last year. Now we're adding in the fact that I just gave you about 8 or 9 names, and I know that you said Grayson Mitchell, but if I asked you to make a case for Darnell Hodge being number one, or True Bronze being number one, or Elijah Swan being number one, or forget Justin Creel being number one, right? I mean, the guy just eclipsed 300 yards rushing a couple weeks ago. You could very easily, I don't think I would have to twist your arm that much to get you to say that Justin Creel's number one.
All of these guys you've named are incredibly talented. Hodge, Bronze, Creel, everyone you've brought up. Swan has to be talented because he carries the entire Tar Heel offense on his back.
Sure.
So, and there are a lot of running backs who have that, and it's unfortunate. There are a lot of running backs, Roper and LeCavier, who are on teams that are constantly playing from behind, and they're throwing the ball 90% of the time in the second half, and they're getting left behind stat-wise, and it's not of any fault of their own. So yeah, it's a lot of it's an equal playing field of talent in the running back position.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting again. I know we went off a lot on the running back position there, and I just think it'll be interesting. We originally were talking about positions that we might be able to get late round value, right? I mean, that's the goal, right? I mean, yeah. I'll tell you this. I haven't had this conversation with you, but this kind of is pretty standard, straightforward, and obvious. The number one reason why I wanted you to join the front office and help me with this is that the number one goal is to be able to find late round value, right? That's the goal, is to be able to go into the 5th round or the 6th round even and grab a guy that has good upside. When I look back at this past draft, the 7th round, I pulled a 70 overall defensive end.
Generic defensive end, yeah.
That was a generic.
There's so much the potential for that again. I think you pulled the rabbit out of the hat with that one, and I think other coaches are going to take notice and start looking at generics, especially with late round value, to find someone at that ranking.
Right. I mean, I was shocked. And so to put that in perspective for some of you guys that are like, well, 70 is not that good. There were guys being drafted in the second round and third round that were 69, 68,
A lot of high
67
60s.
overall. Yeah, like we saw mid 60s in the second and third round. So to be able to get a 70 overall that late, and again, I take a lot of credit and I take a lot of pride in that because we had that list of generics. And that's one thing that I would like to see. I know I've mentioned this a couple times to the front office, and I'm hoping that maybe we don't get it before the end of this season, but knowing that there's 2 full seasons of this class, I'm hoping that we get that list of generics. And maybe the reason we haven't got it is because there's going to be more added before the second season of these prospects starts. But it's really nice to get that list of generics. And then once the scouting combine happens and you get those scout grades on some of these guys, like, I mean, I sat down for a week and I sat in my little war room in my office and I went a week looking at mostly just generics and trying to find, who might be a fit based on the position that I needed, based on, what their strengths are, what their attributes might be. I know you and I had this conversation. I had a full basically scout book on you and what I thought your attributes were going to be. And I think I hit the nail on the head of two out of the 4 I hit, or I was undervaluing and you exceeded. I don't think I had you at 89 speed, but you ended up with 89 speed. I think I had you pegged for like 87. So it'll be really interesting. I do think the generics are super important. Again, one of the reasons why it's nice having you join the team in this role, in this capacity, because it does get a bit cumbersome for one person to try to go through and do all this stuff. So
yeah, and being able to look into the depth of those generics is important. But those, these guys got to realize that those generics are going to be last 2 rounds. That's where those are going to be at. Where you're going to find those guys. Submitted players are the priority, and submitted players who are reliable and who are involved. Like everyone's on the draft board right now. 100% every submitted player is on the draft board. And where you go on there is going to be based off how you handle yourself after you win, how you handle yourself after you lose, what type of league person you are. Are you cheering other people on, or are you contentious with most things? Because you're bringing a whole lot more to a team than just a player on a roster. And if we can find and get behind these right guys who are also willing to put the time in with the reloads and put the time in with growing their player outside of just a normal progression throughout Madden, those are the guys that are going to climb the board because those are the guys who are going to separate themselves from their competition after 3 or 4 seasons.
For sure. Monty Wyatt, love the comment here. So interesting to hear how all this works in more
Congrats
depth.
to Wyatt having a great season out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you want to talk about skill positions, Monty Wyatt could be the first quarterback taken in the draft. It's very possible.
100% congratulations to Baylor for that insane game and Otomo and all of his insane amount of weapons, and Mack and that whole murderous defense. Those guys brought a lot of pain. It was painful to watch.
Tough. We'll get into the power rankings a bit in a minute, but yeah, I think it is important. I'm glad Monty Wyatt brings that up and appreciates that, because I think a lot of these college series prospects don't understand how everything works in great detail, right? It's easy to create a player and be like, wow, this is really cool. Create a player. I'm in Madden. I'm in a college series and kind of, I get to be interactive. I get to be involved. I get to chat, maybe make some friends. And this is really super cool, but not understand how it all works from not just the coach's perspective, but just the overall back end perspective, what the draft is like for us.
It's how so much more than just how you play in a couple of these college games, because I imagine if we took and we looked at Miles McCain and AR at Georgia and we looked at what they submitted, I bet they submitted almost identical stats and identical positions, and I bet their overalls are pretty similar. But those two guys are having 2 completely different statistical seasons, and it comes down to more than just how your guy plays. If McCain is willing to step up and be involved and be a part of his player and be a part of his team and show himself to be what he is, he could suddenly have a ton of value when the season comes. Last season, Luke Poore was the the quarterback of Tennessee. Tennessee was an absolute terrible team, but Luke Poore was a good league guy and a good community guy, and he was someone they knew would be around, and he got drafted in the later rounds because they knew he was a player they could count on to continue to progress as guy and be there when the time came.
All right, so because you brought it up, the comparison between Miles McCain and Asire Reese, right? Both of them, they're 99 awareness. Throw power, both of them had 90, and they both also have 90 for medium accuracy. So certainly, to your point, very similar builds, not quite identical, but pretty close to identical builds. It really comes down to, at the end of the day, who you're building your guy over, and
what teammates you got around you,
what teammates you have around you, what playbook you have, what scheme your team runs. Like, those are a lot of things that you might not know, and unfortunately, you don't have privy to. You don't know what playbook North Carolina is going to be running on offense or defense, or Georgia is going to be running on offense or defense. And because of that, unfortunately, that can bring your player value down a little bit. So, all right, before we go any further, I really want to get into these power rankings because we only got about 20 minutes left. Coach, you want to stick on for a bit and go over,
I'll give my 2 cents on all of it.
All right. So we'll go through these power rankings.
Unbiased as I can make it.
As unbiased as you can, please. Appreciate it. Also, I'm going to have a special guest coming on as well to give his thoughts and his reaction on what these rankings look like. Again, this is entering week 10. This is what the Final Four would look like, presented by Campus Rewind. This is not the official RFL Top 25. This is just simply watching the games. It doesn't matter what your conference record is versus, I don't care about any of that. All I care about is what you look like on the field, who you've played, what your record is. And I'm looking at this as if the Final Four, the college football playoff, were to start right now. And if it were to start right now, I have the Final Four, I have the first 4 out, and then I have 2 teams that are still in the hunt. All right. So we're going to start this off, and we're going to go first 2 teams that are in the hunt. And I'm glad that I have you on the show because
the Irish are probably 11.
This is not great, but last week I had Notre Dame at number 4. They were in the Final Four. Notre Dame was in the Final Four last week. They play Baylor, they lose, and boom, Notre Dame still in the hunt, but drops all the way down to number 10 with the loss to Baylor.
Can't argue with it. Have such a high that was that game with USC and was a very consistent, solid win, and then to turn around and let an amazing Baylor team drop as many points on us as they did. I mean, for us to be able to put up that many points and lose, that just shows how solid Baylor is. So we took a nasty loss to a good team, and so I'm not surprised that's where we are.
So the thing that I will say to kind of piggyback off of where Notre Dame is right now, and something that is going to be super important, Notre Dame has to win out. There's really no way around it because with already having 2 conference losses, right? Notre Dame has a really bad conference loss to Clemson. That's the one that's going to hurt. The conference loss to Miami, that's okay. And so right now you've got to be looking at the cream of the crop in the ACC being Miami, and then Notre Dame and UNC are kind of those 2 teams that are both fighting for the chance to play Miami in the ACC championship and maybe shock the world. And that win could potentially vault them into the Final Four conversation again. But
for Notre Dame to even get to that point, UNC is going to need to lose again. We're going to have to win out, including a win over UNC. So
that's the key.
Odds are against us.
The key there is, you just said it, beating UNC. Notre Dame and UNC play each other in 3 weeks.
Yep.
So in week 12, UNC goes to Notre Dame. And if Notre Dame can win that game, UNC will now have 2 conference losses. Notre Dame will have 2 conference losses, but Notre Dame will have the head-to-head victory over UNC. And so as long as nothing crazy happens, and that's if UNC wins every single game except for that game against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame wins every single game remaining, then Notre Dame should, and I believe would, get that number 2 seed in the ACC, and then at that point you can go from number 10. You can make the Final Four at that point if you win the ACC, certainly by beating UNC late in the season and then beating Miami in a conference championship. Again, not going to be easy.
No,
but still, again,
and I have an insane amount of respect for all of those Miami guys. That is a crazy, awesome team with crazy, good, talented dudes and good guys just in the background. But it hurts right here how nasty that loss was against them. It may have looked close in the scoreboard, but it was a beatdown. And I just need one more shot at redemption for that. I love those guys. All the respect to them. I want to ruin your season. I want us to get one more chance to come out there and just make it all worth nothing. But we got a lot to do to get to that point. And the second we do, we still would have to go over what's going to be an incredibly amped up, solid, awesome Miami roster. So the path for us into the Final Four is there, but it's a difficult one to take care of. And so we just got to start 1 week at a time.
Yeah. And then number 9, Alabama Crimson Tide, record of 6-2. They do have a victory over Florida. They actually beat Miami. They're the only team that has beat Miami. So they do have that feather in their cap.
I don't think that would be the same if they met up again. I just don't feel that this Alabama team would be able to hang with Miami with the way their momentum is right now.
Right. And I don't disagree with you. It was week 1. Miami lost week 1, and then they've rambled off 7 straight wins.
And this is a good Alabama team. They're not bad by means. 6-2, ranked ninth in the country. There's been so many more overwhelming teams to get so much attention that Alabama has been quietly underwhelming for a 6-2 team.
Right. I mean, they did knock the doors off with Texas A&M this past weekend, which at this point, Alabama is going to have to do, because there's teams like South Carolina, there's teams like Florida that are still technically alive for that number 2 spot in the SEC if no one is able to catch Georgia. So Alabama right now in at number 9, Alabama and Notre Dame at 9 and 10. Those are the 2 teams that are still in the hunt, but it's beginning to look a little dim in terms of their chances to get to the Final Four. Next up, we're going to look at the first 4 out, right? So these are not the Final Four teams, but it's 5, 6, 7, and 8. And those teams are Oklahoma in at 6-2, Georgia in at number 6, record of 7-2. Baylor comes in at number 7, they're 6-2. And then there's UNC, who we just talked about quite a bit, in at number 8 with a record of 6-2. Looking at these 4 teams right here, what is the biggest surprise for you?
Oklahoma being so high is kind of a surprise, but again, it's not to take away from who they are. The Tar Heels have such an amazing defense that continuously keeps them in every game. They're so good, and they played well, but their offense being what it is, I mean, you just can't count on who's going to show up under center with them. So I can understand that there. Baylor and Georgia, I could see either of them. These are interchangeable spots right here. I mean, it may be 8, maybe 4 away from 4, but all 4 of these teams are right on the outside, able to jump in with a good win. So
yeah,
I agree. I agree what we see here.
I think the conversations that I had internally with myself were really centered around this group of 4 right here. I think the Final Four.
I don't want to be the what if guy, but if week 1 doesn't happen the way it happens, and there's not weird Madden being Madden, and Baylor doesn't punt and get it blocked, and we're looking at a 7-1 and a 5-3. Could be a completely different roster. Baylor's absolutely better than 6-2.
But we could, I mean, look, we could sit here and play woulda, shoulda on a bunch of games. What if Auburn, didn't blow that lead against Georgia, and we're talking about a 3-loss Georgia team? Like, are they even in the top 10?
Yeah, Georgia has played good against good teams, and they've played good enough against bad teams.
Right, and
wins are wins, though.
that's really where it's very easy to look at this and say, well, Oklahoma's 6-2, Georgia is 7-2. How is Oklahoma ahead of Georgia? Look, I don't really care. Again, many of you are going to sit there and be like, well, they have more wins. They have to be ranked higher. No, that's not how this works.
Yeah, this is all eye test.
Oklahoma is beating the crap out of teams. Yes, they do have a loss to Michigan. Yes, they do have a loss to West Virginia. Look, West Virginia, spoiler alert, you don't see them in the top. You don't see them 5 through 10. That's because they're in the Final Four. Okay. So one of Oklahoma's loss is to a team that is already in the Final Four. And then the other loss was to Michigan, which you can't even call it a burn the tape game because Michigan is a good team. And while I only did the top 10 here, Michigan would probably come in somewhere between 11 and 13, right? Like they have 3 losses, but they're probably one of the best.
That offense is super scary, and at any time they can pop off for a big play with those receivers they got and that quarterback and running back too. They've got just a good offense, just very capable.
Right. So, we can debate and we can have the conversations and argue all we want. I know there's going to be people at UNC that don't understand why they're 8. There's certainly going to be people at Georgia that don't understand why they're 6. And certainly Baylor fans are going to wonder why they're at 7 when they just beat Notre Dame, who was number 4. Why didn't they jump up any higher? Look, I look at these teams and I say, okay, Oklahoma, yeah, they lost to Michigan, West Virginia. Those aren't bad losses. The thing with Oklahoma, which it's going to be very easy for Oklahoma to drop 1 or 2 spots here before going up because Oklahoma doesn't really have any key wins. Whereas when you look at Georgia, the South Carolina loss isn't good. Georgia losing to South Carolina is about the equivalent of Oklahoma losing to Michigan. It's not great. And then the other Georgia loss was Ohio State. But Georgia got the absolute doors blown off them by Ohio State, and it really was pretty embarrassing. And they do have key wins against UNC and Bama. So it's very easy to put Georgia at 5 and bump Oklahoma to 6. And if you want to do that, you can make that case very easily.
These are all pretty 5, 6, and 8. They could all be interchangeable.
They are. I mean, they're all beating up on each other, basically. Like Baylor has losses to UNC and West Virginia. Georgia has losses to Ohio State, but wins against UNC and Bama. But Baylor has wins against Notre Dame. It's just all these teams in the middle are kind of like one-upping each other week by week by week. And we're going to get into the latter part of the season.
This is all just kind of opinions in the middle because if UNC is unhappy with this or Baylor went out and
it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
right.
This is all now. This is a snapshot of this point, but Oklahoma wins out, they'll be in the top 4. Baylor, Georgia, that's just how it is. Win out, and you're going to be somewhere.
Right. I thought we were going to have someone. Maybe we lost them. I thought we were going to get someone on here and get their reaction to this. But I don't know if he's there. Let me try to go out to the phones and see if we've got Alvin Mack from Baylor. I want to see what he has to say about this. Alvin, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm here. How y'all doing, guys?
What is up, Mr. Mack?
Man,
all right, so
I'm doing good.
So here we are. So the first 4 out. You see your boys there in at number 7. What is your initial reaction to that?
We still got an uphill battle, and we're ready to face it. We still got Oklahoma. We got Miami. We still got some big teams on our schedule ahead, and if we win out, I see we got a chance in the conference championship, and that might change us, flop us into the top 4.
Easy.
But
for sure, don't overlook that game at TCU this week, though.
Yeah, big games.
I'm definitely ready for the game for TCU. Y'all might not know, but I'm from Fort Worth.
Oh, come on.
And the guys from TCU didn't even recruit me, but it's all good. Christian Cross had my back, got me out here to Waco, so we got some good things boiling.
You got a good roster over there.
Oh yeah, man. We got a pretty deep roster. We got some exceptional talent up front on offense and defensive line. We got some Atomo, he had a near perfect game yesterday.
Yeah, he didn't miss a
he
pass, and no receiver missed a 50-50 ball. It sounded like some type of sorcery. It just wasn't fair.
yeah, well,
Are you guys going to be able to play nice? I mean, I realize that, this game is kind of fresh in both your minds, but I just want to make sure that you guys are going to play nice.
Oh, no, I got all love and respect for Mack. Yes.
All
Good
right.
community guy, friendly dude. And he's got his team's back. I respect that so much. That's the type of thing I'm looking for as the scout for the Miners. I'm looking for guys like that.
Alvin, let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question. On your team, who is your favorite player to watch outside of yourself?
Christian Cross.
Why?
He dominates interior linemen. He pushes guys around like dummies, and it's senseless how quick he is with that much size.
Is there anyone else in the league not on your team that you've had a chance to watch quite a bit and have sat back and said, wow, that dude's, that dude's a beast. I really like that guy's game. Anyone on any other team that you've said that about?
The Garcia tight end from Florida. That dude's amazing. I don't know if y'all seen him play.
Is that Andres Garcia, right?
I believe so. I think that guy, he's one of the top tight ends in our league for sure. College.
That's weird, Coach. I feel we're all full of tight end at Sacramento. I don't know really much of a need.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna be drafting a tight end anytime soon.
Yeah, but
Mack, what you pointed out something good that I've seen a couple other players with Cross. Just these guys' ability to fight through double teams. There's a couple other players I've seen do that in the league so far this year, and it's such a something that's not kept in a statistical category, but guys who can draw double teams and fight through it and still disrupt the run in the pass game, like those guys are animals. Riggs at North Carolina is another one who does that a lot.
Yeah, my guy Isaac Evans, that dude's a monster. He's the British boxer. He comes from Great Britain. That dude there, he's absolute beast, man. I'm telling you, he eats the weight room up every day in there pushing weight. I'm really excited though to see TCU's receivers up close and personal. Those guys not only fast, but they run great routes. And we got 3 cornerbacks that I think are really up for the challenge, and it's going to be fun to watch.
For sure. Well, it'll be interesting. Again, you brought it up. I mean, the scenarios are there right now. You're sitting at the second spot in the Big 12. All you have to do is take care of business on your own. And, there really isn't any reason why you aren't playing for that Big 12 championship. And at that point, look, like we talked about with the ACC and North Carolina versus Miami or Notre Dame versus Miami, whatever it might be, all you need is a chance. And if at that point you get to that conference championship game, conference championship doesn't mean everything, but it certainly helps. And all you got to do is get yourself there and give yourself a chance. So
it's an extra win. Some teams
it's an extra win, right? That a lot of other teams aren't.
It's another chance to put tape out there. It's another game for statistics. Like being able to get into a championship game carries a lot of weight with it.
Yep, for sure. So Alvin, we really appreciate you coming on the show. Looking forward to watching that game this week against TCU. Best of luck, and really best of luck the rest of the way. Oklahoma could be a tough game. Florida, tough game. Miami, tough game. So, really difficult, really tough road to hoe here moving forward. So best of luck the rest of the way. And we hope to see you playing in that Big 12 championship game.
Hey, thanks, Coach. And congratulations, Frye.
Oh, thanks, man. Good luck to you and you guys, man. We'll be watching you.
All right. Alvin Mack, linebacker for Baylor. If you missed it earlier on, the Baylor Bears came in at number 7. There it is right there. Number 7 in the power rankings, the top 10 here as we head into week 10, the part of the first 4 out, right? So let's recap a little bit here. We had the 2 teams that are still in the hunt, Alabama at number 9, Notre Dame at number 10. The first 4 teams out, Oklahoma, Georgia, Baylor, and UNC coming in at 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then now that leaves very little to the imagination for those of you that know anything about this college series. You pretty much know who these 4 teams are going to be. You might not know what the order is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, here is the Final Four heading into Week 10. If the Final Four college football playoff were to start right now, it would look like this. Boom. Ohio State, number 1 team in the country with a record of 7-1. Miami in at number 2. West Virginia at number 3. And then USC jumps their way back into the Final Four with that Notre Dame loss. USC works their way back into the Final Four. Initial thoughts on this, Coach Frye?
Yeah, I agree with this. USC has proven themselves to be a good team. I know there's been talk back and forth about who they have or haven't played yet, but at the end of it all, USC is playing great. And then I believe between Ohio State, Miami, and West Virginia, I feel like those are 3 interchangeable teams. I feel like no one team out of there would dominate immediately, which is going to lead to some great games in the playoffs. So I'm on board with all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that have been kind of dogging Ohio State a little bit for whatever reason. You want to say the Big Ten is not a great conference. You want to say they haven't played anyone that great. At the end of the day, they've got 1 loss. It was to USC, who USC only has 1 loss. It was to Notre Dame, who's a top 10 team. Look at the
West
remaining
Virginia's
schedule.
losses to Miami, right?
Right. West Virginia's 1 loss is to Miami. So let's do this. Let's go over these. Ohio State's loss is to USC. They're in this quality loss. They're in the top 4. Miami's loss is to Alabama, arguably the most non-quality loss of all these.
But it's still Alabama. It's not Wisconsin or Arizona State. I mean, it's still a solid team.
Right. At the end of the day, all of these teams have 1 loss, and every single team that they lost to is in this top 10. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, think about that for a second. Ohio State's 1 loss is to USC. They're number 4. Miami's 1 loss is to Alabama. They're number 9. West Virginia's 1 loss is to Miami. They're number 2. And USC's 1 loss is to Notre Dame. They're number 10. So, you can't really look at any one of these teams and make any other argument. They're the only 4 teams in the country that still have just the 1 loss. And when you look at the 1 loss, they're against teams that are really good. So
these are all 4 very, very good teams.
Yeah. Now you want to look at what is more likely to happen, or which one of these teams. Let me ask you this question. In your opinion, which one of these teams do you feel is most likely to not be here when the season ends?
I think USC would be the first to slip out. And I see any of the 5 through 8 teams sliding up. Miami's got a couple of solid games still ahead of them. So does Ohio State, West Virginia. So I feel like with what they've got left schedule-wise, I think they're going to be okay. I think USC could slide out, but they could very easily continue to play. Poole could continue to play like he's been playing, Dixon the same, and they could still find their way right there. We could see these 4 flip-flop. But my first out would be USC.
Yeah, and that's where I'm going to. Like, I thought about this for a while, and I not only do I think that USC is the first team that would, or the most likely team to not be here at the end of the season. I actually don't think they will be. I don't think that they're here now.
USC and Miami play
right
quickly, so that's gonna decide that right there.
That's why I don't think USC will be here. I think that game against Miami, I think Miami has the edge. I think Miami wins that game. Miami's at home. Miami's on a roll. I just don't envision a scenario where USC wins that game. Now,
Miami's probably got that game. The real risk for them is Baylor at the end of the season.
Well, if USC does win that game against Miami, they've got LSU, UCLA, and Texas. That is as, I guess, as much of a gift as you can possibly get to end the season. The only issue is every single game that USC plays from here on out is on the road. They're at Miami, at LSU, at UCLA, and at Texas. That's not ideal. But again, right now USC is in, and if they beat Miami, then if they beat Miami, they're at minimum, probably going to number 2, because the other thing you have to look at is Ohio State. Their upcoming
They've got
game
Iowa,
is Oklahoma.
A&M, Wisconsin, and Michigan.
No, Ohio State's got Oklahoma.
Oh, I see.
Are you looking at Ohio State's got Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Wisconsin, and then Michigan?
Okay, I've got Iowa on the schedule that I've got pulled up before they play A&M.
That must have been an old one.
Okay, but so you Oklahoma, well, that's gonna be a solid game.
I mean, Ohio State versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma's 6-2. Oklahoma wins that game, and look, Oklahoma sitting there,
burning teams out too.
Sitting there at number 6 right now. Oklahoma upsets Ohio State, which again I don't think will happen. But certainly
Miami and USC is going to be a big game to affect this ranking a lot. If USC loses, if Miami takes them, which I feel they're going to be favored in that game, USC is going to slide out. But then Miami still has to handle Baylor at the end of the season, and on top of that, UNC or Notre Dame, depending on how that plays out before they end the rankings. So there are a lot of chances for Miami to flounder, but I don't think they're scared at all. They're a solid team, and I think they're ready for every single challenge that's going to be presented with.
I mean, they've got key wins at West Virginia, at Notre Dame, at UNC. You could make an argument that Miami's the number 1 team in the country. They've only got one loss right now, but they won on the road against 8-1 West Virginia, 6-3 Notre Dame, and 6-2 UNC. Like those are huge road wins for Miami at this point.
If Alabama was sitting at 7-1 and probably number 4 in the rankings, that loss would for Miami wouldn't look quite like it does, and they probably sit at number 1.
Yeah, it's just it's unfortunate. But the thing that's going to benefit and help Miami is that game did come in week 1, because you look at a team like, let's look at one of these other teams. You look at USC. If USC loses this week to Miami, they're probably out. They probably don't have a high probability of getting back into the Final Four, simply because that loss would knock them out of the Final Four. And then you got to figure teams like Georgia and Baylor and UNC are right there to get in. And when you look at a team like UNC, who has Tennessee, Iowa, and TCU outside of that game against Notre Dame, those are 3 games that they should win. So let's say UNC wins 2 in a row before even playing Notre Dame. UNC goes to 8-2. A team like USC loses next week. They're out, probably don't get back in. And then we're talking about a USC team that doesn't have much on their resume other than the win against Ohio State. And that's a great win, but they need to have more. Just like Oklahoma is going to need to Oklahoma really needs to win this week against Ohio State in order to really have a chance, because they don't have any key wins on their resume at this point. And
that's going to be a great game.
Yeah, as we get to the end of the season, the committee's going to be looking at strength of schedule, how well you played, like dominance factor. I look at dominance factor.
Yeah, USC is a placeholder right now. I
think Oklahoma might be a placeholder too.
I think Miami's going to put it on USC, which is going to push them out, and then that's going to leave those 5 through 8 teams the chance to see who can win the most dominantly to take that 4th spot for the time being.
I think what's interesting and what's going to benefit Georgia, right? Like right now they're at number 6 in my rankings. We'll see what they look like tomorrow. But the Georgia Bulldogs are 7-2. They play Michigan. I'm going to go ahead and give Georgia that win. Let's play this out a minute. Georgia beats Michigan. They go to 8-2. They beat Tennessee. They go to 9-2. Then they get a bye week before the final week of the season. So there's a very, very high probability that they go into the final week of the season 9-2 going up against West Virginia. And if West Virginia wins out with their games against Oklahoma State and Texas before their bye in week 12, they're going to be 10-1. It's going to be very difficult to knock Georgia very far when they're 9-2 if they lose to that West Virginia team that's 10-1. Whereas we just saw Notre Dame fall from number 4 to number 10 with the loss to Baylor. I don't envision dropping Georgia at 9-2 that far. And at 9-2, we're probably talking about that Georgia team being number 4 or number 5. So if they're number 4 or number 5 and they go to that game and they even lose that game against West Virginia, they probably don't fall any further than 6 again, which is where they are right now. And then they're still the best team in the SEC. They go to the SEC championship. Like we mentioned, you said earlier, they get that extra win, that extra game that other teams don't get. They win that SEC championship, and they're probably vaulted back into the Final Four conversation anyway. Like, I really don't envision a scenario where, even though they're at number 6 right now, I don't envision a scenario where Georgia isn't in the Final Four unless they lose to Michigan or Tennessee.
It just depends to who else wins out. Baylor, I think if Baylor wins out, which includes a game against Miami, I could see Baylor leapfrogging into the top 4. I don't see Miami falling out with just a single loss to Baylor, but
I mean, Baylor's going to have to beat West Virginia.
Yeah,
Baylor's going to have to hope they beat West Virginia to get that far up.
Real good games coming down the stretch here.
For sure. So, wide receiver Patrick Conner at Ohio State's asking, what does the ACC title game look like so far? So, great question. We went over it a little bit at the beginning of the show, but I'll kind of, rehash it here. The way that it is right now, Miami's in and UNC would be in. However, Notre Dame and UNC play each other in 3 weeks. And if Notre Dame has to win out, and Notre Dame has to win out, because if Notre Dame wins out, they will get that victory against UNC, which will give UNC 2 conference losses, which is also what Notre Dame already has, 2 conference losses. But because Notre Dame would beat them head to head in 3 weeks, Notre Dame would get that number 2 seed in the ACC, not UNC. So again, there's a road there for Notre Dame to get to the ACC championship game, but they have to win every single game remaining on the schedule. And if you want to take a look at what that remaining schedule is for Notre Dame, I don't know if you know it off the top of your head, but we can pull it up right here. What is it? We got the bye week this week.
UNC,
so Oregon,
Stanford.
UNC, Stanford. So again, very doable. You get a bye week, so you only have 3 games left. Oregon could be a challenge, right? On the road at Oregon.
I think it's a bit of a trap game for us.
Sure.
Coming off a frustrating loss, then sitting and stewing on it with the bye week, and coming out ready to fight on Oregon, I think is going to be important, and not looking too far ahead to the North Carolina game.
Yeah, I would 100% agree that. I think you said it best. Total trap game. Total possibility for a trap game on the road at Oregon, looking ahead to the home matchup against UNC, knowing that you have to win that game against UNC in order to have a chance at the ACC championship. Total trap game in week 11 against Oregon. I could see that for sure. But again, there's a scenario where Notre Dame can get in, but again, they have to win out. UNC is going to have to falter unless something crazy happens and UNC loses 3 of their final games, which I don't envision in that happening. It really is going to come down to that Notre Dame UNC game.
I see CP talking about the Discord going to be lagging if they win the Natty. Man, there's nothing I want more than to make my way to the title game and ruin Miami's chances at a national title. Respectfully as I can say it, I love those guys. The whole team's full of good dudes, a lot of great community guys, and just good people in general. But, oh man, if I can just ruin it after the terrible loss you gave us, I'd love it. I'd love it. We'll see what happens when the time comes.
I think this is good for Miami. I think last season was devastating. I think guys like Chris Polk and Lito Loso and TJ Metcalf and, just a lot of those Miami guys are still trying to comprehend what the hell happened last year.
Yeah.
Right? Like what happened? How did that happen? So I think this is great for those guys who are now, no longer there, but let's not fool ourselves. They are a big reason why Miami is where they're at right now.
Miami last season had a big opportunity to implode when their season started off bad, and they just kept ringing up some losses in tough games. But despite the pressure that was there from the Discord activity and everything they were saying, they rallied, got it all together, and put together what was a really good season. And then they took those core guys and they recruited with that. And so they're just a good team this year.
Yeah.
I would have loved to see them up against Georgia of last year. If I could fantasy a game, I'd be that one.
I think I have a hard time. I look at the top 3 teams that I have there in the Final Four, and I can't decide. And I'm hoping that maybe the final few weeks of the season will make it a little bit easier for me. But I can't decide on what matchup I want to see more: Ohio State versus Miami or Ohio State versus West Virginia. Or even a rematch of West Virginia versus Miami. I think any one of those games are going to be what people want to see. I think that's what we want to see. I don't think very many of us want a scenario where somehow or another UNC runs the table the rest of the way. UNC knocks off Miami in the ACC championship game. Miami doesn't get the Final Four. UNC somehow makes their way into the Final Four, and they get blown out in the first round of the Final Four, and Miami didn't even get a chance simply because they got upset in the championship game or something, something like that. I don't think that's what the people want. I think we all kind of want some combination of Ohio State, West Virginia, and
there's
Miami.
a lot of great teams, but I think right now the 2 best would be Miami and West Virginia, and I think their competition would be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, see, and I think so we differ slightly there, because I would say for me it's Ohio State and Miami. Hence the reason why I've got them. I've got Ohio State and Miami 1 and 2, but West Virginia certainly not that far behind. But it remains to be seen. I mean, really exciting. There's some great games coming up in week 10 and throughout the remaining 4 weeks of the season. So really excited to see, what the rest of the college series brings. Coach, really appreciate you coming on. Thanks again
Thanks for having me here.
For joining the Miners front office. For those of you that were not here earlier on, the newest member of the Sacramento Miners front office, Director of Scouting and Player Personnel, Anthony Frye, joins the Sacramento Miners front office for the upcoming season. So really excited to have you join the team in this new role, and really excited to, just get into the next season. So thanks again for coming on. Congratulations on the opportunity, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you again. Yep. Awesome. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Take care. All right. So that's going to pretty much do it for Miners Live tonight. Once again, real quick through the top 10. First 2 teams still in the hunt: Notre Dame at number 10, Alabama number 9, UNC 8, Baylor, Georgia, Oklahoma round out 7, 6, and 5. And then the Final 4, USC in at number 4, West Virginia 3, Miami 2, and then remaining at the top spot, the Ohio State Buckeyes. Guys, be sure to check out the RFL Live podcast tomorrow. There is going to be some exciting news. Don't know exactly what it is, but I've heard that there's going to be some breaking news around the college series and what next year's college series is going to look like. So definitely tune in to RFL Live. I believe that's going to kick off sometime around 8:30, barring any technical difficulties. So be sure to check that out. Thank you again to everyone in the chat. Real quick, I'll go through if we got anyone got any fun, interesting parting words, final thoughts. Leo Moon, awesome job. Appreciate the support. What do we got here? Patrick Connor, that 4th spot is going to be huge. Monty, UGA, USC, UNC, and Baylor are all still in it. Absolutely. All 4 of those teams are still in it. Right now, USC is in at number 4 for me. UGA, UNC, and Baylor are just outside. And they all, like you said, 100% correct, Connery. They are all in the hunt. They all are there, and they all have a chance. We've got 4 weeks left of the college series, so sort of anything can happen. But again, along the lines of the college series, some special news coming out tomorrow on RFL Live, so be sure to check that out. Any questions, comments, concerns that you guys have for me, ideas for the show, you want to come on the show, I'm going to do these Final Four rankings every week. So if you want to come on and you want to provide your reaction in real time, as you've seen the last couple of weeks now, I've brought guys in to come on and give their reaction as I announce and as I reveal the rankings. I think that's kind of cool and interesting and neat, and gives the guys an opportunity. They don't know. Nobody knows these rankings prior to when you guys see them. So I come up with them, and they are released and unveiled for the very first time. No one has an opportunity to see them prior to you seeing them live on the show. And so it's really nice to get unfiltered reaction from you guys based on where your team might fall in those rankings. So certainly if you want to get on the show, you want to come on next week, ideas for anything, please hit me up in Discord. You can find me at Miners RFL on Twitter, at Miners RFL on Instagram. And please, 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 guys, don't be afraid to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I believe we're at 70 subscribers right now, and the goal is to get to 100 before the RFL season starts. Once we hit that 100 mark, I will give one lucky listener, viewer, follower, subscriber a t-shirt. So you'll get yourself some RFL swag. I might even let you pick what your favorite RFL team is. And it doesn't even have to be a Miners t-shirt. If you want a t-shirt from, whatever team you represent, or your favorite team, obviously I'd love for you to rep a Miners tee. But this is for you guys. I love the support and appreciate the support. So until next time, this is Chris Dunn, your host, head coach, general manager of the Sacramento Miners, wishing everyone a happy rest of the week. And thank you again. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.